Happy Friday, everybody. This is a live emergency update as Hurricane Beryl is heading toward Texas as a potential mega disaster. Please share this live stream. This is an in-depth breakdown on everything that's happening with Hurricane Beryl, including the potential for a tornado outbreak as a strong low pressure area meanders inland, possibly towards central Texas. So some of the forecast models are even showing a more formidable hurricane here. Some of them are even showing the landfall of a potentially major hurricane near the Port Lavaca area. We are going to break down the global models as well, and I'm also going to break down the tornado potential with this hurricane. Not only do I suspect that there could be the landfall of a potentially major hurricane anywhere from Brownsville up through Port Lavaca area, even the Houston area is included in that cone. But I do think that even if it comes in as a Category 1, it's likely going to be a mega disaster for Texas, and that includes flooding, a tornado outbreak as well. We are going to be chasing this, of course, live here at Team Dominator. We're going to be dropping south here very shortly. We're not going to be taking the Dominator 3 just because salt water would absolutely destroy that thing. But I do think that this is going to meander a little bit inland, and you could almost view it as a strong area of low pressure that increases the low-level wind shear on the northern half of this tropical cyclone. And I do think this is going to be a textbook tornado outbreak for Texas. I was even looking at some of the soundings, and there's a little bit of a dry slot that comes in. But if it comes in as a major hurricane, even a Category 1, the inner core of that hurricane is going to be associated with life-threatening storm surge wherever that onshore flow happens, tornado outbreak. You're going to have floods of all different kinds, storm surge flooding, coastal flooding, flash flooding, river flooding. And we are going to be headed south in the rental Dominator with a potential mega disaster heading toward central and southern Texas. We're breaking it down here live at Team Dominator headquarters. I'm actually up in Norman, Oklahoma, and we are definitely about to drop south. So I'm going to be breaking down a lot of the different forecast models here. We're going to be breaking down, of course, the HWRF model. We're also going to be looking at the global models. We're going to be looking at some ensembles. The new 12Z HWRF model is coming in right now, and we are going to compare that with the 6Z run. I also urge you to check out the Tropical Tidbits model. It does look like the 12Z HWRF is a little bit higher in terms of its pressure than at least some of the others. So right now, this hurricane is meandering over the jungles of the Yucatan, and this is that 6Z HWRF model that basically shows a major hurricane coming right into Port Lavaca. Just one model. Here's the official National Hurricane Center cone. And you can see those hurricane warnings that continue there in the Yucatan. This came in as a Category 2 last night near Cozumel, but reports on the ground suggest that maybe it wasn't quite as bad as it could have been. Some of the interaction of land with the Yucatan with that small inner core compact hurricane may have weakened it just on approach to Cozumel. I bet, though, that the east side of Cozumel definitely has some big problems. Now it's out near the Merida area, about to emerge on shore north of the Bay of Campeche. So this is going to be moving up through the western Gulf of Mexico, and it looks like it could intensify. Right now, the official hurricane cone takes it basically up toward Corpus Christi on Monday morning and making landfall as a Category 1 hurricane. But notice the cone expansion out here as this thing slows down, putting on the brakes, meandering inland into portions of central Texas through the middle part of next week. So this is going to be moving very slow. It's going to be associated with tornado potential every single day as it lifts inland, including the landfall day, even the day preceding landfall on Sunday, as this is just offshore Brownsville Sunday evening. We'll probably be down near Brownsville, following it up all the way to the north. But that cone expansion is accounting for this storm putting on the brakes. There's also a little bit of a trough up here in the polar front jet, and that could infuse that dry air into the circulation. You might pull a little elevated mix layer off as that surface low, strong surface low, lifts northward into central Texas, and that could even enhance the tornado potential as that low pressure moves just a little bit inland. But right now you can see that inner core of the hurricane, of the tropical cyclone, the hurricane here, right over the jungles of the northwest Yucatan. and it's continued to trend off to the north, and that took it over the northern tip of the Yucatan, basically a jungle out there. It might as well just be an ocean surface. Not going to take that much out of this tropical cyclone, but it is going to be a tropical storm when it emerges on the other side, and could easily intensify as it moves through the western Gulf of Mexico. There's also a bit of a dry upper level low just to the west of it, and that dry air could curtail the rapid intensification just a little bit, and that's why the National Hurricane Center has this making landfall as a Category 1 hurricane. But I have to tell you, even if this comes in as a Category 1, it's likely going to be a mega disaster in Texas. You're going to have that storm surge flooding central into the southern Texas coast. You're going to have that tornado potential, and then the hydrological disaster is going to begin. The river flooding, the flash flooding out there, and if this heads into the flash flood alley of Texas and the Texas Hill Country, very complex terrain out there as well. You're going to have life-threatening flash flooding. The 12Z intensity models take it up to a Category 1 when it makes landfall, but some of the other models, the HWRF, even the GFS model, showed intensifying into a slightly stronger hurricane on approach to Corpus to Port Lavaca. The further right the track, the more residence time it's going to have over those warm waters of the western Gulf of Mexico, and there's a chance that this thing could even spike up to a major hurricane. You know how this works with these tropical cyclones. They can easily be a lot stronger than many of the forecast models will show. And that 12Z HWRF is coming in. I'm going to piece through the 6Z run really quick. It shows this thing intensifying very rapidly. This is by Saturday night. By late tomorrow night, it's got it down to 974 millibars central pressure. Very symmetric storm. Here's Brownsville just off to the northwest of it. Passing just to the east of Brownsville, the thing drops into the 960s. This is a bit of an outlier, but still shows a scenario that could potentially happen. Coming in with that 962 millibar pressure, this would be a major hurricane. You've got an eye wall here. These barrier islands would need to be evacuated because you'd have big time storm surge along these barrier islands and along the bay here near Port Lavaca. Just major storm surge. And look at the supercell storms that are coming in next, right after that. All these coming in. That's Port Lavaca, a little bit left. This is down near Corpus. And this is the 6C HRRR. But yeah, these are going to be potential supercells coming in. I'm more worried about the tornado outbreak potential here in this front right quadrant. You're going to see these supercell storms just training onshore, dumping precipitation as well. Just look at these supercell storms coming in. And this is a very strongly sheared environment. I'm going to show you in the models. As this strong surface low comes in, it creates very strong low-level wind shear in the front right quadrant of these tropical cyclones. And I think that you're likely going to have a tornado outbreak with this scenario, especially given the close proximity of the dry air. These supercell, this strong surface low is going to be interacting with that mid-level dry air that could actually enhance the instability as that dry air wraps in to that mesocyclone. So that's what I'm especially worried about here is the tornado threat with these supercells that are going to be training onshore into Texas. You basically can view this as a strong surface low meandering in central southern Texas. You're also going to have impacts from the inner core of the hurricane. Not dissimilar from Hurricane Harvey, although the location of this tropical cyclone could be very different. It also is a little bit smaller in size, which could mean that it dumps just a little bit less in the way of rainfall, but usually these tropical cyclones just dump. And look at all these supercell storms. This is going to be on Monday night, Monday into Tuesday, as this surface low meanders inland. I'm very concerned about the tornado outbreak potential, the flood disaster that could happen, especially over that complex terrain of Texas. And it's even going to lift up to the Red River, this band of supercells. I think there's going to be a potentially significant tornado outbreak with this type of a scenario as it moves inland, potentially even over the Shreveport area, possibly up into Arkansas. But a lot of uncertainty on the exact track after this comes ashore. But even if it comes ashore as a weaker hurricane, which I bet it does, this is a bit of an outlier here. Although it has a 985 hurricane on approach. Still going to be a fairly intense hurricane when this thing comes ashore. Cat 1, Cat 2, maybe even a Cat 3 when it comes in, but a little bit further east on these global models. This is the 12Z HWRF that's coming in right now. And there is quite a bit of warm water out in the western Gulf of Mexico, even though it's not anomalously high, usually this time of year, the Gulf of Mexico is still warm during the summertime. Let me show you last night's European model run here. This is the European model. That's the Port Lavaca area, a little bit further to the left. But the last night's European model takes this thing in near Corpus, between Brownsville and Corpus, as a fairly formidable tropical cyclone. You can see it has that compact inner core, and anytime a global model intensifies a hurricane this much, it definitely has that potential to be a powerful hurricane. Anywhere from Brownsville all the way up through Port Lavaca, need to keep an eye on this. Even the Houston, Galveston area up to the Sabine River, need to keep an eye on this just in case it decides to try to slowly meander up the coastline and stall out. But I think that the tornado potential is going to be pretty significant as this meanders inland. Anywhere in the front right quadrant, you can see where those winds shift from an easterly to an east-northeasterly direction. That's really where you want to watch out for the tornado potential, and including these bands that come in a little bit removed from the tropical cyclone. But these are all going to be tornado-producing supercells, possibly even a little bit further north on the effective warm front with this tropical moisture. And also over the Texas Hill Country, if this takes this track near San Antonio and Austin, this is going to dump big-time rain out there, and likely Flash Flood Alley is going to have absolutely catastrophic flooding from this. The only positive, or the only mitigating factor, would be the small size of this tropical cyclone, and maybe that'll be a little bit less in the way of how much precip that it dumps. This is Wednesday evening out here. Still tornado potential near the Arklatex into southwestern Arkansas. You're going to have to watch this through the middle portion of next week. Looking at the European model, some of the rainfall in excess of a foot here over the Texas Hill Country. This is going to be a mega disaster in terms of flooding, debris plugs as well. Big problems over interior Texas, and you're going to have tornado potential as well just to the east of that core. So not only a mega flood disaster, but also a tornado outbreak disaster as well. And all of these dark brown areas, that's rainfall in excess of a foot. And that's what happens when you have a slow-moving tropical cyclone coming into this complex terrain. It's going to cause big problems. And anywhere right of the center, you have enough rainfall that could cause flooding as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being a little bit further right as well. But usually the European model is king with these tropical cyclones. And let me show you what that wind shear looks like a little bit on our GFS model, which is just a little bit further right. In terms of the rainfall, though, you still get the double-digit rainfall totals here. A little bit of a minimum near the Houston area with at least last night's GFS, but watch how you trend from last night to this morning. Just a little bit further right with the track of that core of a hurricane. One good news, piece of good news, is that at least it has a small core. It's small in scale, and that's why I think that you have a little bit less in the way of the heavy rainfall that's happening with this tropical cyclone as it lifts inland. Well, looking at the 0 to 3 kilometer shear, it'll really show you why you get a tornado outbreak. This is on the northern quadrant of that cyclone. You're looking at 0 to 3 kilometer wind shear here, storm relative helicity. There's the hurricane coming ashore. Watch what happens as that comes ashore in Texas. Comes right up near the Port Lavaca area, a little bit in between Corpus and Port Lavaca. And all those bright colors on the north side of that tropical cyclone, those are very strong low-level wind shear values, and that's why you get most of your tornadoes on the front and front right quadrant of that tropical cyclone. And the operational GFS is showing that as it moves inland. That's Monday afternoon, Monday evening. We're going to be ripping tornadoes here on the northern side of this surface low as it comes in into central Texas. Northern front right quadrant, all of those areas are going to have tornado potential. And look at that hodograph, everybody. You have got a strongly curved hodograph on the front right quadrant of that surface low. This means that you've got a ton of easterlies all the way up the profile on that northern side of that surface low. That's why you get these very favorable hodographs like this. Storm motion here would be like north-northwest on that front right quadrant. And then you've got all these easterlies basically creating a hodograph that wraps around the tip of that storm motion vector You get a lot of storm relative inflow. You even get a lot of ventilation in the upper level. So a lot of times these supercells are classic, and you've got your classic tropical sounding. See how the green line is right over the red line? That's a tropical sounding right there. Moist, saturated all the way up, skinny cape a little bit. But I was looking at some of the European model soundings, and you definitely had a little bit of dry air entrainment that happened on some of those soundings, especially as you get into Tuesday, Wednesday, as it lifts up into central Texas. And that actually could enhance the tornado threat a little bit as it lifts off to the northeast, bringing with it near the Arklatex on Tuesday evening that strong wind shear as well. You can pick a forecast sounding there in southern Arkansas, and we actually can start to see that dry air start to wrap into that cyclone in the mid-levels. That's going to increase the instability a little bit and could even increase the tornado potential in the days after landfall. So even if it makes landfall as a Category 1 hurricane, I still think that this is going to be a mega disaster for Texas in terms of not only the inner core, but also the flooding and tornado outbreak as it comes in. And you can see this onshore flow down Corpus up toward Port Lavaca. That's going to cause major storm surge flooding down across South Texas and right along the immediate coastline. You can definitely see all that onshore flow just pumping that water right into all those inlets right along this Texas coastline. And in fact, you even get onshore flow all the way up into Galveston Bay. Bolivar Peninsula is likely to have some storm surge as well. But different than that last system, you didn't have the day after day of onshore flow. That was more of definitely a ripper. This one's a little bit smaller in size, a very compact hurricane. It's also moving as well when it comes in. So it'll be very interesting. Central, southern Texas coastlines, I do think that you're going to have some big problems with this tropical cyclone, especially if the 6Z HWRF model is anywhere remotely correct. Just want to make sure that I'm still live here as well, ripping this live. Definitely check out our Twisters IRL series if anybody's interested. In the meantime, if you don't have anything to do on this Friday, we just uploaded it. Definitely check it out. We got episode 2 that's coming in today. But if you live in Texas, now is the time to prepare for this. And I just shifted over to this 12Z HWRF model. This is on tropicaltidbits.com. It has a 985 low by Saturday night, Sunday morning at 9Z. And you go back and forth from 12Z back to the 6Z HWRF model. And the 12Z is coming in a little bit weaker with that storm, about 14 millibars higher pressure. It's probably that 6Z run. Could have been a bit of a unicorn model. But you can definitely see it hurts a little bit structurally, but it's trying to wrap in that convection right around that inner core. It's possible that this dry air could prevent it from intensifying until it gets a little bit closer to the Texas coast, which it seems like the HWRF model is showing. Probably going to have like tornadic supercells moving near the Brownsville area by Sunday morning, 12 to 15 Z. And this new HWRF model takes it a little bit closer to Brownsville, a little bit further west now. 977 millibar central pressure. Still intensifies, and now this is the furthest out that we're available, but this is the 12Z HWRF model just offshore Brownsville, 977. And you go back to the 6Z run, and it's actually roughly similar, so it's not trending a little bit further west. Definitely the 6Z to the 12Z in a rough agreement in the positioning here of Beryl. Just the intensity is a little bit lower, so that probably was a bit of an outlier, that 6Z run, but it still is intensifying. These are coming in as I'm talking to you right here. You can get this at tropicaltidbits.com. This would still take it up, probably up near Corpus, as a very formidable hurricane. Probably will still potentially be a Cat 2, maybe even a Cat 3 type of a hurricane. And you've got all these supercell storms that are getting ready to come on shore there as well. The HMON is a little bit weaker with that system. It has a 977 millibar central pressure, roughly similar agreement in the positioning near that 96 west longitudinal line. And you also have these hurricanes that are these supercells that are going to be miniature hurricanes basically, but supercells that are going to be orienting in that band, making landfall very near the Corpus area up toward Port Lavaca. That's, I believe, Corpus right here. Sunday night. Boy, this is the 12Z HMON. Still drops that thing to frickin' 970 millibars as it comes ashore. That would cause major storm surge out here, especially on these barrier islands. We're going to have to research some stilt homes out here as well. Maybe reserve some of those stilt homes out on these barrier islands, because there is going to be a tsunami-like wall of water with a scenario like this. And then it comes ashore, bringing with it the tornado potential in these outer bands, the front right quadrant. That's an intense minimum pressure there, 975, still holding its own as it meanders over the Texas Hill Country. Look at these east to west moving supercell storms. You got to be kidding me with that. These are going to be moving east to west, capable of producing supercell tornadoes. Look at that, this band of supercell storms right there. You got this band of supercell storms in the eastern quadrant. These are going to be tornado warnings. And then you even have a conglomerate of these tornadic supercells within a band right there. Basically, all the eye wall of a hurricane is a bunch of supercell storms just smashed together into a donut shape. And each of them have mesovortices within the eye wall as well. And I've even seen Simon Brewer with Stormgasm. Saw a wedge tornado there on Pine Island during Hurricane Irma inside of the inner core of that tropical cyclone. So definitely this entire front right quadrant, when that comes ashore in Texas, is going to have the potential of producing significant tornadoes, strong, potentially even violent tornadoes with that as those come ashore. And some of the models even show that thing meandering up toward the Dallas area, bringing that tornado potential and flood potential along with it. And we're still kind of watching the HWRF model as it comes in. Here's the European model, 6Z. We just looked at the 0Z European model. Takes it very close to Brownsville, but just a little bit to the west of 96 West. So rough agreement between the HMON and the HWRF model with that system just offshore of Brownsville. But then it does that. It puts on the brakes just offshore, curls off to the north, coming in at about a 989 central pressure. Probably more of a category 1 there, but still potential for that mega disaster, that flooding, that tornado outbreak with that compact surface low coming inland. But the hurricane models, a little bit stronger with that storm. But the global models are definitely starting to agree on where that's coming in. This is the 12Z GFS model, very close to Corpus. More as like a category 1 type of a hurricane, but those hurricane models are still showing this thing a little bit stronger. 974, look at it intensify as it's just off the coastline. If it's a little bit further right, it'll be even stronger. But that's a 974 millibar pressure, central pressure, likely category 1 hurricane. Shore parallel winds until you get up here, a little bit further north, up near Port Lavaca. Up here, when you get those onshore winds, that makes a big difference in terms of storm surge. More shore parallel a little bit further south. But keep in mind, this is not a forecast. That's the National Hurricane Center cone that we need to really gravitate toward. And let me show you how that looks. Still a hurricane, of course. Forecast to be a tropical storm when it comes onshore. This is the official cone, 10 a.m. Central Time advisory. And takes it right up a little bit further north. So this has been drifting northward, and we've seen expansion of the cone downstream as well, kind of accounting for that uncertainty as this slows down. You can see that even by midweek, it could be somewhere in central Texas, dumping rain, causing tornadoes as well. But it slows down quite a bit on approach to the Texas coastline. Those are usually the worst case scenarios. Remember Hurricane Florence in the Carolinas? Put on the brakes, and even though that made landfall as a category 1, caused major frickin' problems out there. National Hurricane Center discussion. Center of Beryl made landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, just northeast of Tulum at 11Z. Landfall intensity is somewhat uncertain, but surface observations suggest the central pressure rose up to the 977 to 980 millibar range before landfall. Likely as that small inner core of the hurricane was interacting a bit with the Yucatan. Cyclone is now weakening as it moves further inland. The next 24 hours of Beryl should be steered generally west-northwestward by the southern portion of the subtropical ridge over the southeastern U.S. After that, it turned northward, even northwest, as that break in the ridge caused by a combination of a trough and the mid-latitude westerlies and also that a little upper trough moving westward over the southwestern Gulf of Mexico should bring the center over the western Gulf in about 72 hours. Subsequently, as guidance has come into better agreement, there is still uncertainty based on the possible strength and vertical depth of Beryl. A stronger, vertically deeper cyclone would feel more steering from the upper level southwesterly flow from that upper level trough, and thus would have a more northward motion, while a weaker system would probably continue more northwestward and probably would come in near the Brownsville area. Overall, the guidance favors the more northward motion and has shifted a little bit to the right, and the new official forecast also, it's nudged a little right to the previous forecast. Beryl should continue to weaken well over land, expect to emerge over the Gulf of Mexico as a tropical storm. After that, it could take 12 to 24 hours for the cyclone structure to recover over the Gulf of Mexico before re-intensification can begin in earnest. Based on this and the overall trends of the intensity guidance, the new forecast calls for gradual strengthening to start after 24 hours and continue until landfall. One important note is that the GFS and European models suggest that ongoing westerly shear could decrease after 48 to 60 hours, accompanied by an increase in upper level divergence. That means it could strengthen a little bit more than currently forecast if the center stays over open water. Has it at 85 miles an hour near the coast right now, slightly stronger hurricane. So we do think that that is just going to continue. But yeah, it looks like the reports on the ground show that that probably was a slightly weaker tropical cyclone when it came in to the Yucatan Peninsula. And now storm chasers have to deal with getting off the island. Getting off the peninsula, excuse me, unless they're on Cozumel. So thank you everybody for tuning in to this weather report. The worst case scenario, I think, is probably a major hurricane coming into this portion of the Texas coastline with major storm surge. And if it's a little bit stronger, then it means that the tornado potential could even be greater as it moves inland. It means that it'll dump more rainfall. The flooding will be a lot worse, and the coastal flooding, the storm surge, of course, would be a lot worse as well. But we're just going to keep on watching this. Be sure to share this live stream if you know anybody in the path of this dangerous hurricane. We're going to be going live for the landfall coming up. But Team Dominator is about to make major preparations for intercepting this multifaceted storm, possible mega disaster heading for central and southern Texas. And don't be so focused on the intensity of this hurricane at landfall. Even if it's a category 1 coming in, it's still going to be associated with a tornado outbreak, a flooding mega disaster, and maybe worse. That's probably the best case scenario, unless this thing could somehow weaken and just head into Texas as a tropical storm, or head into Mexico as a tropical storm, which probably isn't going to be happening. Thank you everybody for tuning into this live update. Thank you Team Dominator members for supporting these weather reports. We are going to be heading south to intercept this dangerous hurricane and tornado outbreak. Live intercept mode is imminent. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you have a great rest of your Friday. I hope everybody had an incredible Independence Day yesterday with those July 4th celebrations. Thank you everybody, and never stop chasing. Thanks, Karen.